What's going on, guys? My name is Moose. I'm with John the Fletcher Music, and today we're going to be doing a string change on an electric guitar. So to get started, we need to first know the difference between an acoustic and an electric. An electric guitar is actually somewhat easier than an acoustic guitar to put the strings on, mostly for the strings putting on. With an acoustic guitar, we have what we call bridge pins. So how you would get the strings out, you have these little pins that would stick up on the actual body of the guitar, and you would take a sort of string winder that has a little indent here. You fit it on that peg here, get it locked in, and then you would pull up to get the pin out. That's how you get the string in, that's how you get the string out. Just that peg by itself. The electric guitar is a little bit easier because they don't have those pegs anymore. So fitting this guitar in is actually a lot easier. Specifically, what I have here is a Schecter C6 black guitar. This one I already did the liberty of taking the strings off because it's not so much of a process to take them off. But if you see right here on the tail end of the guitar, you'll see that there's these little holes right here. This is where the string fits in. And on the back side of this guitar is the actual holes where you would feed the strings in. So you'd feed the ball end on the bottom end. Okay? So it's a little bit easier. There are some electric guitars that may take a little bit of an extra step. Every guitar is different from one another. So what I have here is a Strat style guitar. This one specifically has a backplate on it. The backplate is, when you open it up, actually just has the place where you put the strings and some springs, because most of these Strat style guitars have a tremolo piece here that allows the bridge to move, but also come back into place thanks to the springs on the back. So when you're doing your string change, all you gotta remember is with the screwdriver, you take all 6 screw holes out, take the back plate off, and you would do your string change normal, just like this electric guitar that I'm going to be showing you guys today. Okay? So, that's the difference between an acoustic and electric. No bridge pins. A lot easier. So before we do the string change, let's talk about the strings we need to put on. It is very important to make sure that you have the right gauge on. Usually 9 times out of 10, especially if you've just bought a brand new guitar, 9s is typically the safest. This is a pack of some D'Addario EXL 120. These are in a gauge of 9 to 42s. But 9s is sort of the safe number that if you don't know what goes on your guitar, it's typically it. Usually if you buy like a guitar that's used or very vintage and you don't want to do a whole lot of research on it, 9s is usually the safest number to put on. It is important to always make sure that you do research on your guitar. Most vendor websites, like Schecter or Ibanez or Fender or Gibson, when you look up the model, they'll actually tell you what gauge size strings are on there, usually. But 9s is usually your safe number. Okay? What this customer wanted us to do is actually put a set of 10s on here. Specifically, I'm putting on a set of some 10s in the elixirs. So these are 10s to 46 instead of the 9s to 42s like I just showed you with the D'Addario packet. So this is what we're going to be using to put on the guitar. Okay? The tools that you're going to need to use in order to do the string change are as followed. You will need one string cable cutter, or just any sort of wire cutter in general. Specifically, I like this one because it's got the little dip right here, making it easier to get in very narrowly to cut. And then a string winder to make it so we don't gain arthritis or any sort of carpal tunnel winding the strings much more. Okay? This next procedure that I'm going to show you guys is more or less sort of cleaning the guitar itself. On the guitar, it's got a little bit of some dust and some dirt that's built up on the body and even on the neck of the guitar. So what I'm going to be using is as followed. I'm going to be using some guitar polish. Specifically, I'm using the Dunlop 65 guitar polish and its respective helpful tool, a polishing cloth. Typically, you want to use a polishing solution with a polishing cloth. Never use a rag for this because you'll end up getting a whole bunch of smears and fingerprint marks. These are great at getting rid of dust and polishing off, more reflective surfaces on some guitars. Okay? The other thing I'm going to be using is sort of for the fretboard only. Do not use the guitar polish for the fret. Instead, what I want you guys to use is some lemon oil. This lemon oil right here is absolutely wonderful at getting rid of a lot of that dirt and buildup that's in between the fretboards here. So what I'm going to be using is not the polishing cloth. I'm actually using just a simple rag. This one's been used by our shop quite a bit. We've used it for many years, cleaned it up every now and then, but it still kind of keeps its coloration due to the guitar or lemon oil that we've been using. So be very mindful which rag you use, especially if you have one that you're not really too fond of using to clean your dishes, I hope. But this one right here will do just fine. Okay? So I went ahead and took the liberty of taking the strings off of this because when you do the string change, it'll be a lot easier. And thankfully, when you take the strings off, it's not too much hassle. You detune the strings on the headstock here, so you make sure that the pitch on them is very, very, very low. You can't almost hear it anymore. So that way you can take your wire cutter and cut your strings right on off and then pull them out from the bottom end over here. Okay, so the strings are already off, making the process a whole lot easier. So let's talk about how we're going to clean the guitar. First thing you want to do is let's work on the neck. So what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to grab some guitar polish, some lemon oil, and I am going to put just a little dab on the actual cloth itself. I'm not going to pour it on the guitar, I'm actually going to pour it on the cloth instead. So I'm going to tip it over, feed it in just like that, not too much, just a small little dab like that. Okay? Now, with 3 fingers, typically I'm going to use my index finger, my thumb, and my ring finger. I'm going to kind of pinch it so that my pointer finger is what I'm going to be using. And I'm just going to start on the frets and clean them off. This guitar definitely needed a little bit of some clean. Now on some guitars, depending on how old they are and how long it's been since they last been changed, sometimes the debris may not come up, and that's because the dirt's kind of stuck to the wood on the guitar, so you would have to do a very heavy, thorough, deep clean to get them out. Thankfully, this guitar player changes his strings every now and then, so getting a lot of this dirt and dust off of it is a lot easier. The reason why I'm doing the neck first is because I want the lemon oil to kind of sit on the guitar, so that way I don't get my strings, covered in lemon oil when I do this. So I'm doing the neck first. And I'm just kind of trying to get in between the frets. The actual metal piece is what we call the frets, just in between them. And you'll notice it's definitely a lot shinier. Very, very shiny. Which is good. That means it's reacting very, very well. You see right there, all that black? That's a lot of that, dirt and debris that I just cleaned off of it. So she's looking good now. Okay, while I wait for the lemon oil to kind of dry off a little bit, we're going to focus on the body now. So it's got a lot of dust on this. So I'm actually going to be using a very special friend of mine. This is a little Bob Ross. Bob Ross here is just a simple paintbrush, not anything necessary. You don't necessarily need this. You can use your polishing cloth to do this, but I find this one a lot easier to get rid of a lot of that dust and, that's been settling here before. So I'm just using this to clean up as much as I can. Now you probably noticed that this is gone. That's because this is detachable. Okay? This is very, 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 very important. You don't lose this, and you make sure you keep it the same way. You notice how we have 3 pointing one way and then 3 pointing backwards? You want to make sure that they're in order. And if you don't know which side should go where, these little screws on the back here are going to make it a lot easier to figure it out. Some of these bridges will typically have these little 6 pins right here, these little screws that allow us to move these up and down, are usually always going to be on the back. So this is the side that's going to be facing this way on the guitar. And I'm just lifting this up so I can get in between, get as much as I can using a little Bob Ross here. And I like Bob Ross because she doesn't leave any scratches. Okay, nice and neat. Okay, so with the guitar polish, what I'm going to be doing here is I'm just going to be taking this polish here. I'm going to spray in sort of like a 4-corner of the guitar. I'll have one right here, one right here, one right here, and then one towards the back. Just 4 corners. So on one side of the cloth, I'm just going to spread the moisture around the guitar itself, getting it on as much as I can on it. This will help clean the guitar off of all that dirt that's been sitting on it for ages. Okay, with the one side, moistured, it feels moist on it, I'm going to use the other side as sort of my buff. And what I'm going to do here with the buff is I'm going to use basically just one finger here. I'm going to have my index finger and ring finger in between the cloth here, so that way I can just sort of buff with one finger. And I'm just going to go back and forth. Be very rapid with how you do this. This will help get rid of a lot of those fingerprints that's been sitting on that guitar, especially if you have a more polished surface. Thankfully, this one is not polished, so I don't have to worry about getting too much, but, some people don't like those fingerprints on their guitars. And there we go. Put this back on. Perfect. Okay? Now, I'm going to come over here to the headstock of the guitar and kind of clean that off a bit. Sometimes a little bit of some dust and dirt builds up on this sucker. So I'm just going to use the dry side of this just to get rid of all that dust and dirt that's been sitting on here. Now, while you are checking the headstock of your guitar, you may want to check the actual bolts that are sitting right here, these little octagon shaped pieces right here. You may want to make sure you grab a 9-inch adjustable wrench and make sure those are tight and not loose. Thankfully, by feeling this, none of these are loose at all. This will help making sure that your tuner peg doesn't wobble around when you put the strings on. Okay? So I'm not really doing much polishing on this side. I'm just trying to get rid of all that dirt, make it look a little bit clean for the customers. That way they know that the guitar is in good hands. Okay. Now it comes to the important part. I've let that lemon oil kind of sit for a bit, let it dry out, and it's looking good. So now let's do the actual string change. So I'm going to have my guitar faced over here real quick. And I'm going to go ahead and pull out the strings. Once again, this is Elixir's 10s to 46 as the customer wanted. And the way the gauge on these strings work is it's based on the size. So the smallest number is going to be for the smallest string, and the biggest number is going to be for the biggest string. So this one's little e, this one's B, G, D, A, and big E. So I'm going to start with big E first. Okay? So when you take the string out, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to unwind it, because it's usually going to be balled in. Okay? This ball end piece right here is what's going to be inserted from the back end. So I'm going to flip the guitar over real quick, or at least show the back side of the guitar. And what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make sure I put it on the E string, which is this very bottom one. Try not to get inverted. And I'm going to feed it in, and that ball end is going to catch inside. Just like that. I don't have to put too much pressure on it, just like that. Okay, so that's one string in, all the way through. I'm going to go ahead and do that for the following: A, D, G, B, and little e. So I'm going to do them respectively in order. So I'm going to take this off real quick so it doesn't fall out. And I'm just going to feed her in. So that's A. This one is D. I'm gonna go ahead and feed D in. Right here, number 3. You may have to kind of prod it a little bit to get the string to fit through. Sometimes they don't like to feed in. That's 3. Here is Mr. G. Sometimes these windings are a little bit finicky. So I'm prodding around trying to get it to fit in the hole. Here we go. Pull it from the other end. Whoop. And this one's B. And try not to let your guitar fall. Try to hold it very steady. You don't want any more bumps or scratches on it than it already does have. Especially if you're doing this. So I'm kind of cradling the guitar. Nice and in. Now some people put the strings on a little bit different. I find this the easiest. If I get my strings on, I don't have to spend too much time putting them on. I can just spend more time tuning them and getting them wrapped, rather. And also, be careful with your small strings, because if you drop them, like I just did, oh man, these things will blend in with the carpet, making it super, super hard to find them. Alright, here we go. Little E. Feed her in, prod it a little bit till I can get the hole right. There we go. And pull her in. And there we go. All of my strings are nice and inside. Okay? If you have one of these, remember, the little screw ends are going to be facing the back part. And try not to adjust these little pieces right here unless you really, really have to, or you may have to take it to a repair guy to make sure that these are level. These are important. If these get adjusted at all, sometimes you'll end up getting some buzz on the guitar, or you'll end up getting some things happening to it, which we don't want. We don't want some anomalies. Okay? So, now what we're going to do here is sort of tie the guitar. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the guitar, the low E string all the way through as tight as possible and let it sit across the bridge, which is the little metallic piece right here. I have it sitting across where it needs to be. I'm doing this one string at a time. Now I'm going to come over here to the headstock of the guitar. I'm going to get the camera a little bit closer so you can see it. Let me get this out of the way. Okay, as you pull the string all the way through, what you're going to want to do is with your string winder now, you're going to string the guitar. You're going to make sure that you get the hole of the guitar where you're going to feed it through facing the direction of the neck. Okay, so I'm going to have it fit all the way through, just like that. And now I'm going to sort of keep tension on the string so it kind of plays a little bit of a note. Not too much of a note, but enough. And I'm going to sort of grab the string with my hand here and my index finger as sort of a feed. I'm going to put it at the nut, and I'm going to pull some slack back. How I measure the slack is I'm actually going to be using the fretboards here to tell me. So for the bigger strings, I'm going to be using frets number 2. For the higher string, I'm going to be using fret number 3. So for the E string, I'm going to pull slack from here all the way back to the beginning of the first part of the second fret. So number 2 is beginning. The second string, I'm going to be in the middle, and third, I'm going to be at the end. Then when I get to these smaller strings, I'm going to be at the beginning of 3, the middle of 3, and the tail end of 3. So the treble side, which are G, B, and little e, are going to be on fret number 3. E, A, and D, the low strings, or the bass strings, are going to be on fret number 2. So this is E string. So I'm going to be right at the start of number 2 here, pulling my slack back. Okay? Now, when I'm doing the string change here, be very, very mindful how you're going to do this. So, pull string back to fret number 3, or I'm sorry, fret number 2 for the E. Now, I'm going to wind the string, but I'm going to do it in a specific way. When the slack starts to come back, I'm actually going to feed my end over the string's tail end. See that? I'm going over the string. Let me bring it in so you can kind of see. It's over the string, which is what we want. Okay? Then as I keep turning it, when it comes back, I'm going to let my feed stay under the string. This helps lock the string in so it doesn't kind of feed itself out, and will also help keep the guitar from getting out of tune as much. So every slack after this point is going to stay under. So you go over once and then you stay under. And I'm just going to tune it till I get about a pitch. Like that. Okay? Do the same thing for the other strings, except I'm going to feed the slack back a little bit more. So right here, feed it in. This one's going to be in the middle of fret number 2. Once again, I'm going to go over the string. I'm going to stay under. Now be mindful of how you're putting the strings on. This is what I call a bass side, treble side guitar, meaning that it's got 3 bass and 3 trebles on each side of the guitar's head. So the way that you want to feed the slack in is you want your string to come inwards towards the middle part here. You'll see right here how my strings are coming inwards, not outwards. So I want to make sure all my feeds are going in from the middle and not from the back side over. Okay, that's very important. You don't want to put any strain on the string, otherwise you're going to break it, and you're going to have to do this process all over again. So make sure you come inwards. And this is what I call a 3 treble, 3 bass side guitar head. Okay? So this one's going to be towards the end of fret number 2. This is where the string wire comes in. I'm going to come over, pull that slack up a little bit, and stay under. You can probably see why I'm using the string winder now. This makes it so much easier. I went over the slack and stayed under. And there's what they look like right now. Perfect. Okay. Now we're going to do the treble side, or the higher strings. So, make sure you pull all the way through, enough to where you get sort of a note. Okay. Now I'm going to feed this one back. This one's G, so I'm going to feed this one back to the beginning of fret number 3 now. And I'm going to tune opposite. I'm going to string it backwards, because once again I want my string to come inwards. So I'm going to go over the slack. Then I'm going to stay under. Just like this. Just enough to where I feel that tension and hear that note. I'm not going to tune it up to pitch, but just enough to where I get the slack. We'll tune it later. Okay, make sure you get your peg hole to fit all the way through. This one's going to be the B string. This is going to be in the middle of fret number 3. Make sure you hold your tension nice and firm. You don't want your string slipping on you, and you definitely don't want it slipping as you're tying up here. Otherwise, it's going to be a pain. So make sure you keep one hand very, very steady, keeping slack and keeping strength at all times. So I'm going over and under, and I'm staying under. We're almost finished. We got one more string left after this one. Just enough to get a pitch. right. Okay. Let's get that last string on there. These little smaller strings will sometimes fight you. So make sure you go over your slack and you stay under your slack. There we go. Alright, now I'm going to grab a tuner. A tuner of any types will make this process a lot easier. Specifically, I'm using the Snark. This is a clip-on tuner, so I don't have to worry about background noise interfering when I'm trying to tune the guitar. So I'm going to tune them to pitch. Here's my E. Here's my A. My D. B. And there's my E string. Okay, so I got my strings up to pitch. My strings are on, but I'm going to do some extra steps here to make this a little bit easier on you. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to pull the string up and I'm just going to shake them about. This gets rid of any extra slack in the string so it won't detune on you when you start playing. And sometimes you'll hear a little pop like that. That means you found a little extra slack that was sort of hidden. And after you have this done, you clip these tail ends off, and you have yourself a good little guitar. Alright, so bending the strings back in, get rid of all that extra slack. And eventually, as I keep doing this over and over again, the string itself won't really fight me that much anymore, and my strings will stay perfectly in tune. Maybe not perfect, but at least near perfect. Okay? Typically when I do these, I do these little bends at maybe 3 to 5 times. Alright, I think she stopped fighting me now. One last turn. Perfect, 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 and perfect. Alright, so now we're going to clip these little ends off here using our little string cutter. Remember, this is where that bezel, that little bowl kind of helps out. I can get as close to the string as possible without stripping the end off. So I can get as close as possible, so I don't prod myself whenever I put my head on this. Do this over and over. And now I can take my hand and put it up here, and I'm not going to get any proddings on it or anything like that. Do be mindful when you do strip these little tail pieces off, sometimes your string will get out of tune, so do one last checkup after clipping. Thankfully, this guitar has been very, very nice to me. And with that being said, looks like this guitar here has turned out pretty good. Just got to get rid of this extra dust on the side. Get rid of as much as I can on it. And she's good to go. Alright. So my name is Moose, I'm with Fletcher Music, and this is how you do a string change on a electric 6-string guitar.